The smoke was already curling toward the rafters when Clara Chambers realized she had burned the chicken beyond salvage, and her hands trembled as she grabbed the iron skillet handle without thinking, the searing heat making her cry out and drop the pan with a clatter that echoed through the small cabin like a gunshot. It was 1882 in Florence, Arizona, and the desert heat that had plagued the day now seemed to mock her from outside while she stood in the kitchen of a man she barely knew. A man whose advertisement for a mail-order bride had seemed like salvation 3 weeks ago when she had stepped off the stagecoach with nothing but a worn carpetbag and dreams of a better life than the one she had fled in Missouri. The burned meat hissed on the floor, grease pooling around it, and Clara felt her stomach clench with familiar dread. She had promised herself things would be different here. She had sworn that this new beginning would erase the years of walking on eggshells, of trying so desperately to be perfect and failing every time. But here she was again, ruining dinner on the third night in her new home, and Gideon Davis was in the next room, probably hearing every sound of her incompetence. Her previous husband, Martin, would have been through the doorway by now. The memory of his rage was so vivid she could almost feel it, the way he would tower over her, his voice rising with each word until she felt smaller than the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. He had never needed much excuse, and burned food had always been enough to set him off. She had learned to flinch before the blow came, had learned to make herself as small as possible, had learned that apologizing never helped, but silence might. Martin had been dead for 8 months now, kicked by a horse in a moment of divine justice that Clara had never quite allowed herself to feel grateful for. But his shadow followed her west anyway, lived in the tension of her shoulders, in the way her breath caught when a man moved too quickly. She heard the scrape of a chair in the other room, heard boots on the wooden floor, and her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She stepped backward until her spine hit the edge of the dry sink, her arms coming up instinctively to protect her face, her whole body tensing for the impact she knew was coming. Gideon Davis appeared in the doorway, all 6 feet of lean muscle and sun-weathered skin, his dark blonde hair falling across his forehead, his gray eyes taking in the scene. The burned chicken on the floor, the overturned skillet. His new bride backed against the sink with her arms raised and terror written across her delicate features. He froze. Clara watched him through the gaps in her arms, watched him absorb what her reaction meant, watched understanding dawn in those gray eyes. For a moment, they stood in tableau, the man in the doorway and the woman braced for violence that did not come. Then Gideon Davis did something that Clara had never seen a man do in her entire 22 years of life. He sat down. Right there in the doorway between the kitchen and the main room, he lowered himself to the floor and crossed his legs, making himself smaller, making himself less threatening. "It's just food," he said quietly, his voice carrying the gentle drawl of someone who had grown up in Texas before drifting west. "Chicken burns. I have burned more meals than I can count, Clara. It does not matter." She did not lower her arms immediately, could not. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs, and her breath came in shallow gasps that she tried desperately to control. This had to be a trick. Men did not just sit down. They did not just accept failure with quiet words and calm voices. "I'm sorry," she whispered, hating how her voice shook. "I did not mean to. I was trying to get it right. I know you work hard and you deserve a good meal and I ruined it. Clara." He said her name like it mattered, like she mattered. "Look at me, please." She forced herself to lower her arms slightly, to meet his eyes. He had not moved from his spot on the floor. His hands rested loosely on his knees, his posture open and unthreatening. He looked almost sad, and that confused her more than anger would have. I am not going to hurt you, Gideon said, and there was something raw in his voice that made her believe him. I do not know what happened to you before you came here, but I need you to understand something. I will never raise a hand to you, not over burned food, not over anything. That is not who I am. The words hung in the air between them, and Clara felt something crack open in her chest. She had heard promises before. Martin had made promises too in the beginning. But there was something different in the way Gideon said it, in the way he had sat down without her asking, in the way he stayed perfectly still while she decided whether or not to trust him. I should clean this up, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. We can clean it up together, Gideon offered. After you let me see your hand, you grabbed the hot pan, did you not? She had almost forgotten the burn in the chaos of her fear. Now that he mentioned it, her palm throbbed with angry heat. She looked down at it, saw the red mark already beginning to blister. Gideon rose slowly, telegraphing every movement. I have salve in the cupboard, my mother's recipe. It works well on burns. May I get it for you? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched as he moved to the cupboard, his movements careful and deliberate. He retrieved a small tin and brought it to her, but he did not reach for her hand. Instead, he set the tin on the counter beside her and stepped back. You can apply it yourself, or I can help if you want. Whatever makes you comfortable. She stared at the tin, at this small act of consideration, and felt tears prick her eyes. I do not understand you. What do you mean, you paid for my passage here? You married me, you have rights. You could, she stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Gideon's jaw tightened. I could do a lot of things. But just because the law says a man has rights over his wife does not mean I have to act like a tyrant. You are a person, Clara. You deserve to be treated with respect. Most men do not think that way. Most men are fools. He ran a hand through his hair, and she noticed how it made him look younger, less like the stern cowboy who had met her at the stagecoach station, and more like someone who might understand loneliness. Look, I know this arrangement is strange. We do not know each other. You took a risk coming out here to marry a stranger, and I respect that. But I want you to know that you are safe in this house. I will do everything I can to prove that to you. Clara picked up the tin with shaking fingers. The salve inside smelled of herbs and something sweet she could not identify. She scooped some out and began to apply it to her burned palm, welcoming the coolness against her heated skin. Thank you, she said. You do not have to thank me for being decent. In my experience, I do. The sadness in Gideon's eyes deepened, but he did not press her for details. Instead, he moved past her, giving her plenty of space, and knelt down to start cleaning up the burned chicken and grease. She watched him work, this man who had advertised for a wife because he was tired of being alone on his small ranch, this stranger who had just shown her more kindness than her first husband had in 3 years of marriage. I can do that, she said. I know you can. But you do not have to. He glanced up at her. We are partners in this, Clara, or at least I hope we can be. That means sharing the work, the good and the bad. She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Instead, she wet a rag and joined him on the floor, wiping up the grease while he dealt with the ruined meat. They worked in silence, but it was not uncomfortable. It was almost peaceful when the floor was clean. Gideon stood and offered her his hand to help her up. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. His grip was firm but gentle, his calloused palm warm against her uninjured hand. I have some beef in the cold box, he said, and there are beans already cooked. We can make do with that for tonight. Tomorrow I can show you how I usually cook the chicken if you want. The trick is keeping the heat lower than you think it needs to be. You would teach me. Why would I not? I am not a great cook, but I learned enough to keep myself fed. Though I will be honest, Your biscuits yesterday were better than any I have ever made. So maybe we can teach each other things." It was such a simple statement, but it lodged itself somewhere in Clara's chest and refused to budge. The idea that she might have something to offer, that she might be valuable for more than just keeping house and warming a bed, felt revolutionary. They prepared the simple dinner together, moving around the small kitchen in a careful dance. Gideon talked while they worked, telling her about the ranch, about the cattle he raised, about his plans to expand the herd next year. His voice was soothing, and Clara found herself relaxing incrementally, her shoulders loosening, her hands steadying. When they sat down to eat, the meal was plain but good. Gideon ate with appreciation, complimenting the way she had seasoned the beans. Clara watched him across the rough wooden table, trying to reconcile this gentle man with every expectation she had arrived with. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally, surprising herself with her boldness. "Of course. Why did you want a wife? You seem perfectly capable of taking care of yourself." Gideon set down his fork and considered the question. "I suppose I got tired of talking to the cattle. They are not great conversationalists." His small smile faded into something more serious. "The truth is, this is a hard land, Clara. It is beautiful, but it is unforgiving. I have been alone out here for 5 years, and the loneliness started to feel heavier than the work. I wanted someone to share this life with, someone to build something with. But you could have courted someone local. Florence is not a big town, and the few unmarried women here have their pick of suitors. I am just a rancher with more debts than cattle and a small cabin that needs repair. Not much of a catch." He met her eyes. "Besides, I thought maybe someone from somewhere else might want a fresh start as much as I wanted company." "Was I wrong about that?" "No," Clara said softly. "You were not wrong." They finished their meal in companionable quiet, and when Clara rose to clear the dishes, Gideon helped without being asked. He heated water for washing while she scraped the plates, and they fell into an easy rhythm that felt impossibly domestic for two people who had been strangers 3 days ago. That night, Clara lay in the small bedroom Gideon had given her, staring at the ceiling and listening to him move around in the main room where he had insisted on sleeping. He had told her on their wedding night that he would not pressure her, that she could have as much time as she needed, that they would figure things out together. She had not believed him then, had lain awake that first night expecting him to change his mind, to exercise his rights as a husband. But he had kept his distance, had been nothing but respectful and patient. The burn on her palm throbbed dully, but the salve had helped. She thought about how Gideon had sat down on the floor, had made himself small and unthreatening, had given her space to breathe and choose. She thought about how he had said, "It's just food," like he meant it. Like burned chicken was not a crime worthy of punishment. Maybe, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, maybe there were good men in the world after all. Maybe she had found one in the Arizona desert. The next morning dawned hot and bright, as all morning seemed to in Florence. Clara woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly in one of her 2 simple dresses and emerged from the bedroom to find Gideon already up, standing at the stove with his back to her. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "I made coffee. I hope it is not too strong." "I like it strong," she said, moving to pour herself a cup from the pot on the stove. The kitchen looked different in the morning light, less like a place of failure and more like a space full of possibility. "I need to ride out to check on the cattle today," Gideon said, transferring eggs from the skillet to 2 plates. "It will take most of the day. You are welcome to come with me if you want to see more of the property, or you can stay here, whatever you prefer." Clara considered. The idea of staying alone in the cabin felt both appealing and terrifying. She was not used to having choices. "I would like to come if I would not be in the way." "You would not be in the way. I would enjoy the company." He set the plates on the table and gestured for her to sit. "Do you ride?" "A little. My father had horses when I was young before he died, but it has been years. We can go slow. I have a gentle mare that will treat you well." They ate breakfast together, and Clara found herself asking questions about the ranch, about the cattle, about life in Arizona. Gideon answered everything with patience, clearly pleased by her interest. She learned that he had come west after his parents died, looking for a place where he could make his own way. He had worked for other ranchers for years before saving enough to buy this land and start his own herd. "It is not much yet," he admitted, "but it is mine. Ours now, I suppose." The casual way he included her in the ownership of his dream made Clara's throat tight. She was not used to being included in anything. After breakfast, Gideon saddled 2 horses, a sturdy roan gelding for himself and a sweet-tempered bay mare for Clara. He helped her mount, his hands on her waist brief and impersonal, and then they were riding out into the desert landscape. The land around Florence was stark but stunning. Rocky outcroppings rose from the sandy soil, and hardy mesquite trees provided occasional shade. In the distance, mountains shimmered in the heat haze. The sky stretched vast and blue overhead, broken only by the occasional hawk circling on the thermals. Gideon pointed out landmarks as they rode, teaching her the boundaries of his property. They found his small herd of cattle grazing near a creek bed, about 40 head in total. Gideon dismounted to check on a few of them, running his hands over their flanks with practiced ease, checking hooves and looking for any signs of illness or injury. Clara watched him work, noting the gentle competence in his movements, the way he spoke softly to the animals. There was something tender in it that made her see him differently. This was a man who cared for things, who took responsibility seriously. "They look good," he said finally, swinging back into his saddle. "The grass has been decent this year, despite the heat." They rode further, up into the foothills where the land grew rockier and the views more spectacular. Gideon led her to an outcropping where they could see for miles in every direction. Florence was a small cluster of buildings in the distance, and beyond it, the desert stretched endlessly. "I come up here sometimes when I need to think," Gideon said, dismounting and helping Clara down. "It reminds me how big the world is, how small my problems are in comparison." They sat on the rocks together, sharing water from the canteen Gideon had brought. The heat was intense, but there was a breeze up here that made it bearable. "Can I ask about your husband?" Gideon said quietly. "Your first one, I mean. You do not have to talk about it if you do not want to." "But I keep thinking about how afraid you were last night, and I wonder what he did to make you that way." Clara was silent for a long moment, watching a lizard skitter across the rocks. Part of her wanted to keep it all locked inside, to pretend the past had never happened. But another part of her, a part that was growing stronger in the light of Gideon's kindness, wanted to speak it aloud, to make it real so maybe it could start to heal. "Martin was not always cruel," she said finally. "When we married, I was 18 and he was 25. He seemed charming, attentive. My mother had died the year before, and I was living with my aunt who made it clear I was a burden. Martin offered me a home, a future. I thought I was lucky. When did it change? Almost immediately after the wedding. It was like he had been playing a role and no longer needed to once I was legally his. He had opinions about everything I did, how I dressed, how I cooked, how I spoke. Nothing was ever good enough, and when I failed to meet his standards, he would get angry." She paused, gathering her courage. "At first it was just words, but words have a way of escalating." Gideon's hands clenched into fists on his knees, but his voice stayed gentle. "He hit you?" "Yes. Not where it would show, usually. He was careful about that. He did not want the neighbors to know what kind of man he was. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny thing is, I think they knew anyway. People always know, they just do not want to get involved. I am sorry you went through that. He is dead now. The horse that kicked him did me a favor, though I feel terrible thinking it. You should not feel terrible. A man who hurts his wife does not deserve sympathy. Clara looked at Gideon, at the anger in his eyes that was not directed at her but for her. It was a new experience, having someone be angry on her behalf rather than at her. "Why are you different?" she asked. "What made you this way?" Gideon was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the distant horizon. "My father was a good man, kind and patient. He treated my mother like she hung the moon and stars. They laughed together constantly. Even when times were hard, even when we were poor, they had each other, and that seemed to be enough. I grew up thinking that was how marriage was supposed to be, a partnership built on respect and affection." He looked at her. "When I decided to advertise for a bride, I knew I wanted to build that kind of marriage. Not because I expect you to love me right away or anything like that, but because I believe that is the foundation everything else should be built on. What if I cannot be what you want?" The question came out small and scared. "What if I am too damaged, too afraid, Clara?" He shifted to face her more fully. "I am not asking you to be anything other than yourself, whoever that is. The woman who burned chicken last night is the same woman who made incredible biscuits the day before. The woman who flinches when I stand up too fast is the same woman who was brave enough to travel across the country to start a new life. All of those things are you, and all of them are fine. You do not have to perform for me." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks before she could stop them. She had cried plenty in her first marriage, silent tears while Martin berated her, terrified tears when his fists flew. But these were different. These were tears of relief, of release, of something that might have been hope. Gideon did not try to touch her or comfort her physically. He simply sat beside her and let her cry, his presence steady and calm. When she finally got herself under control, he offered her his handkerchief without comment. "Thank you," she said, wiping her eyes. "You do not have to thank me. I do. Because you are giving me something I have never had before. The chance to figure out who I am without someone telling me I am doing it wrong." They sat on the rocks for a while longer, talking about easier things. Gideon told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about his parents and the small farm they had worked. Clara found herself talking about her own childhood, about her kind father who had died too young, about her mother who had struggled with sadness her whole life. By the time they rode back to the cabin, the sun was starting to lower in the sky. Clara felt exhausted but lighter somehow, as if speaking her truth had lifted a weight she had been carrying for years. That evening, she made dinner again, this time with Gideon beside her showing her how he cooked chicken. He was not lying when he said he was not a great cook, but he was competent, and his easy manner made the process feel less like a test and more like a shared activity. The chicken turned out well, golden and juicy, and Clara felt a swell of pride when Gideon complimented it. They ate on the small porch as the desert cooled around them, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple. "This is my favorite time of day," Gideon said, "when the heat breaks and everything gets quiet, like the world is taking a breath." "It is beautiful," Clara agreed, and it was. The harsh landscape softened in the evening light, and the first stars were beginning to appear overhead. Over the following weeks, Clara and Gideon fell into a routine. They rose with the sun and worked through the day, him tending the cattle and maintaining the property, her managing the household and learning the rhythms of ranch life. In the evenings, they would sit together and talk, sharing stories and slowly building something that felt like friendship. Clara's fear did not disappear overnight. She still flinched sometimes when Gideon moved too quickly. She still had nightmares that left her gasping in the dark. But gradually, incrementally, she began to relax. She learned that Gideon meant what he said. That when he promised not to hurt her, he kept that promise. That when he offered to help, he actually helped rather than taking over and criticizing. She also began to notice other things about him. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The way his hands, rough from work, could be surprisingly gentle when he was mending tack or handling a tool. The way he listened when she spoke, really listened, like her words mattered. One evening about a month after her arrival, they were sitting on the porch together when a rider approached. Gideon stood, his hand reflexively moving toward the rifle he kept near the door, but he relaxed when he recognized the visitor. "That is Tom Benson," he told Clara, "my nearest neighbor. Good man." Tom Benson was a weathered man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard and kind eyes. He dismounted and shook Gideon's hand warmly before turning to Clara with a respectful nod. "So this is the bride we have been hearing about. Welcome to Florence, Mrs. Davis." "Thank you, Mr. Benson." "Just Tom, please. We do not stand on ceremony out here." He turned back to Gideon. "I wanted to let you know there is a dance in town this Saturday. Church is organizing it. Thought you two might want to come meet some more folks." Gideon glanced at Clara. "What do you think? Would you like to go?" The idea of meeting a whole town full of strangers made Clara nervous, but she also found herself curious. She had barely been to Florence since arriving, had seen little beyond the ranch and the surrounding desert. "I would like that," she said. They spent the next few days preparing. Clara had only the 2 dresses she had brought with her, and neither was fancy enough for a dance. But Gideon surprised her by producing a bolt of fabric from a trunk in the corner. "This was my mother's," he said. "She was saving it for something special but never got the chance to use it before she passed. I think she would be happy for you to have it." The fabric was a beautiful deep blue, soft and well preserved. Clara ran her fingers over it, touched by the gesture. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." "Do you sew?" "I do. I can make something simple." She spent the next few evenings cutting and stitching by lamplight while Gideon mended tack nearby. They did not talk much during these companionable silences, but Clara found she did not need to. There was something peaceful about working side by side, each focused on their own task, but aware of the other's presence. The dress came together beautifully, fitted at the bodice and full in the skirt. It was the nicest thing Clara had owned in years, and when she tried it on the night before the dance, she felt almost pretty. Gideon's reaction confirmed it. When she emerged from the bedroom, he looked up from the letter he was writing and his jaw actually dropped. "Clara, you look beautiful." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It is just a simple dress." "It is not just the dress. Though you did an incredible job with it, you just look happy. That is what makes you beautiful." His words stayed with her through the night and into the next day as they prepared to go to town. Gideon hitched up the small wagon, and they rode into Florence together as the afternoon began to cool. The dance was being held in the church, which was really just a large wooden building with a cross on top. People were already gathering when they arrived, families and couples milling around outside in their Sunday best. Clara felt Gideon's hand settle lightly on the small of her back as they approached, a gesture of support rather than possession. Gideon Davis. A large woman with a warm smile descended on them immediately. "And this must be Clara. Oh, my dear, we have been so curious about you. I am Martha Henderson. My husband is the minister here." Clara found herself swept into introductions, meeting what felt like half the town in rapid succession. There was Tom Benson with his wife Sarah, a thin woman with sharp eyes and a sharper wit. There was the shopkeeper Daniel Wright and his grown daughters. There was the schoolteacher, Miss Emily Ross, a stern-looking woman who softened when she smiled. There was the doctor, James Mitchell, a young man who had only been in Florence a year himself. The names and faces blurred together, but everyone was friendly, welcoming. Several of the women made a point of telling Clara that there would be a ladies' quilting circle meeting next week if she wanted to join them. The men clapped Gideon on the back and made jokes about married life. When the music started, Gideon offered Clara his hand. "May I have this dance?" She took it nervously. "I am not very good." "Neither am I. We can be terrible together." They joined the other couples on the floor, and Gideon was true to his word. He was not a particularly skilled dancer. But he was steady and patient, guiding her through the steps and laughing when they stumbled. Clara found herself laughing too, something she realized she had not done in months, maybe years. They danced several songs, and then other men asked to partner with Clara, as was customary. Gideon did not show any jealousy, just smiled and went to get them both punch. Clara danced with Tom Benson, who was much better at it than Gideon, and with Dr. Mitchell, who was about her age and friendly in an earnest way, but her eyes kept finding Gideon across the room. He was talking with some of the other ranchers, his expression animated as he discussed something she could not hear. He looked handsome in his clean shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed. She felt an unfamiliar flutter in her stomach watching him. When they took a break to eat the food that had been laid out, Sarah Benson sat down beside Clara. "You are good for him," she said without preamble. Clara blinked. "I beg your pardon, Gideon. Tom and I have known him since he first came to Florence. He is a good man, but he has been lonely. You can see the difference in him already. He smiles more. I have not done anything special. You are here. That is special enough." Sarah patted her hand. "I know mail-order marriages can be difficult. You do not know each other. You are trying to build a life from nothing. But I think you two have a chance at something real. He is one of the good ones, our Gideon." "I am starting to realize that." The evening continued with more dancing, more conversation, more laughter. By the time they climbed back into the wagon to head home, Clara was exhausted but happy. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the desert air had cooled to something almost pleasant. "Did you enjoy yourself?" Gideon asked as they drove. "I did, very much. Everyone was so welcoming. They are good people, most of them. Florence is a small town, but that means folks take care of each other. Look out for one another. It must be nice, having that kind of community." "It is. I hope you will come to feel part of it too." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking beneath them, the horses hooved steady on the packed dirt road. "Gideon," Clara said finally. "Yes. Thank you for tonight, for introducing me to everyone, for dancing with me even though we were both terrible at it. For making me feel like I belong somewhere. You do belong, Clara. You belong here with me if you want to." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. Clara thought about the past month, about all the small kindnesses Gideon had shown her, about the safety she was beginning to feel in his presence. She thought about how she had started to look forward to seeing him in the mornings, how his voice had become a source of comfort rather than dread. "I think I am starting to want to," she said softly. Gideon's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers threading through hers. It was the most intimate touch they had shared, and Clara's breath caught. But there was nothing demanding in it, nothing frightening. It was just connection, simple and warm. They held hands the rest of the way home, and when they arrived, Gideon helped her down from the wagon with a gentleness that made her chest ache. At the door of the cabin, he paused. "Clara, I want you to know something. I am not going to rush you into anything. Whatever develops between us, it happens on your timeline when you are ready, if you are ever ready. What if I am never ready? She had to ask, had to know if there was a limit to his patience. Then we are still partners, still friends, still building a life together. The rest of it, the physical part of marriage, that is not the most important thing. I would rather have you comfortable and happy than anything else. Clara reached up and touched his face, her fingertips brushing his jaw. He held very still, barely breathing, letting her be the one in control. You are a remarkable man, Gideon Davis. I am just trying to be decent. That is what makes you remarkable. Decent is rarer than it should be. She leaned up and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek, then retreated into the cabin before she could lose her nerve. Gideon stood on the porch for a long moment before following her inside. That night, Clara lay in bed thinking about the evening, about the feel of Gideon's hand in hers, about the way he looked at her like she was precious. She was not ready to share a bed with him, not yet. The scars from her first marriage still ran too deep, but she was beginning to imagine a future where she might be, beginning to believe that intimacy could be something other than an obligation or a source of fear. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. As summer deepened into fall, Clara and Gideon's relationship continued to evolve. They worked together more seamlessly, anticipating each other's needs and rhythms. Clara took over more of the ranch responsibilities, feeding the chickens they had acquired, tending the small garden she had started, even helping with some of the lighter cattle work. She gained confidence in her new life, buoyed by Gideon's steady support and the friendships she was forming with the women in town. The quilting circle became a regular part of her week, and she found herself confiding in Martha Henderson and Sarah Benson about her past, about her fears, about her growing feelings for her husband. "He is in love with you, you know," Martha said one afternoon as they stitched together. Clara's hand stilled on the fabric. "He has never said so." "He does not need to say it. It is written all over his face every time he looks at you. The question is, how do you feel about him?" Clara thought about it, about the way her heart lifted when she heard Gideon's footsteps on the porch, about how she had started seeking out excuses to touch him casually. A hand on his arm, a brush of shoulders as they worked side by side. About how she found herself studying the strong lines of his face when he was not looking, admiring the way he moved, the capable strength in his body that he never used to intimidate or harm. "I think I am falling in love with him," she admitted, "but I do not know how to tell him. I do not know how to be in love without being afraid." "Love is always a risk," Sarah said gently, "but some men are worth the risk. Gideon is one of them." That evening, Clara decided to take a chance. She made Gideon's favorite dinner, beef stew with the vegetables from her garden and fresh bread that had become her specialty. She wore the blue dress she had made for the dance, and she let her hair down from its usual practical bun. Gideon noticed immediately when he came in from working. His eyes widened and he stopped in the doorway. "What is the occasion?" "No occasion. I just wanted to do something nice." They ate together, the conversation flowing easily as it always did now. Clara asked about his day, and he told her about a calf that had been born that morning, about his plans to build a better barn before winter. She told him about the quilting circle, about the pattern she was working on, about the letter she had received from her aunt back in Missouri. After dinner, they moved to the porch as usual. But instead of sitting in separate chairs as they typically did, Clara sat beside Gideon on the bench he had built, close enough that their shoulders touched. He looked at her, surprise and something else, something heated in his gray eyes. "Clara." "I have been thinking," she said, her heart pounding, "about us, about this marriage, all right." His voice was careful, neutral, like he was afraid of spooking her. "When I came here, I was running away from my past, looking for safety, and you gave me that. You gave me space to heal, time to figure out who I am without someone hurting me. You have been patient and kind and everything I did not know a man could be. Clara, please let me finish. I need to say this. She took a breath. I am not that terrified woman who stepped off the stage coach anymore. I mean, I still have moments of fear. I probably always will, but you have helped me become someone stronger, someone who can see a future instead of just surviving the present. I am glad, Gideon said softly. What I am trying to say is that I do not want to just be your partner anymore, or your friend. I want to be your wife, really your wife, in every way. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Are you sure? I do not want you to feel pressured. I am sure. I am terrified, but I am sure. Because I love you, Gideon. I think I have been falling in love with you since that night you sat down on the floor and told me it was just food. Clara. Her name was a prayer on his lips. I have loved you for weeks, months maybe. I did not say anything because I did not want to burden you with my feelings. But I have loved you since I saw you trying so hard to make everything perfect, since I realized how brave you are, how strong. You are everything I hoped for and so much more. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But Clara did not pull away. She met him halfway, her lips finding his in a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Gideon rested his forehead against hers. We can go as slow as you need, he said. I do not want to rush this. I know, and I love you for that, but I am ready, Gideon. I am ready to stop being afraid and start really living. That night, Clara went to Gideon's room instead of her own. And if she was nervous, if old fears tried to surface, Gideon's gentleness and patience and love chased them away. He made her feel cherished, desired in a way that was reverent rather than demanding. And when Clara finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt safe in a way she had never imagined possible. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through the window and Gideon's arm around her waist. For a moment, old panic tried to surface, the instinct to flee before anger could wake. But then Gideon stirred, his hand moving to gently stroke her hair, and she remembered. This was different. He was different. Good morning, he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Good morning. How are you feeling? Happy, Clara said, and realized it was true. Really, genuinely happy. Good. That is all I want. For you to be happy. They stayed in bed longer than usual, talking quietly, touching softly, building new memories to overlay the old painful ones. When they finally rose and started their day, something had shifted. They moved around each other with new ease, new intimacy. Gideon kissed her before heading out to work, and Clara found herself humming as she went about her tasks. Life settled into a new rhythm. Clara and Gideon were no longer strangers building a partnership, but husband and wife building a marriage. They laughed together over meals, worked together during the day, and fell into bed together at night. The physical intimacy became easier, more natural, as Clara learned that it could be about connection and pleasure rather than duty and pain. Winter came to Florence, bringing cooler temperatures though rarely frost. Gideon worked on expanding the barn as planned, and Clara helped when she could, holding boards steady while he nailed them in place. They bought more chickens and 2 pigs, expanding their small ranch bit by bit. In town, their relationship became a source of quiet admiration. People could see the love between them, the way they looked at each other, the gentle touches and shared smiles. Martha Henderson told Clara she had never seen Gideon so happy, and Dr. Mitchell mentioned to Gideon that his bride was good for him. Christmas came, and Clara and Gideon celebrated quietly at the ranch, exchanging simple gifts. He gave her a beautiful silver locket that had belonged to his mother. She gave him a shirt she had sewn herself, embroidered with his initials. They attended the Christmas service in town and hosted Tom and Sarah Benson for dinner, beginning their own traditions. As the new year of 1883 dawned, Clara realized she had been in Florence for 7 months. 7 months that had changed everything. She was not the same frightened woman who had arrived with her carpetbag and her trauma. She was stronger now, surer of herself, and she was deeply, completely in love with her husband. In February, Clara began to suspect she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses had always been irregular, so she was not sure at first. But as weeks passed and other symptoms appeared, she became more certain. The thought filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She waited until she was absolutely sure before telling Gideon. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, she took his hand. "I have something to tell you." He turned to her, concern flickering in his eyes at her serious tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine. I am pregnant, Gideon. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her. Then a smile broke across his face, so wide and genuine that it made Clara's heart soar. "A baby? Really? Really? I have been to see Dr. Mitchell. He confirmed it. The baby should come in September." Gideon pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "This is amazing. You are amazing. I cannot believe we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her face. "How are you feeling? Are you scared?" "A little," she admitted. "My mother died in childbirth. It makes me nervous." "We will make sure you have the best care, whatever you need, and I will be there with you every step of the way." Over the following months, Clara's pregnancy progressed. She was sick in the mornings at first, but Gideon was patient, bringing her tea and crackers, holding her hair when she needed to be sick. As she began to show, he was endlessly fascinated by the changes in her body, his hand often resting on her growing belly, feeling for the baby's movements. The women in town were excited, showering Clara with advice and offers of help. Martha organized a quilting bee to make baby blankets, and Sarah gave Clara a cradle that had held all her children. The community rallied around the young couple, invested in their happiness. Gideon became even more protective as Clara's due date approached. He insisted she rest more, take on fewer physically demanding tasks. Sometimes it chafed, his concern feeling like it bordered on control. But when she expressed this to him, he listened. "I am sorry," he said. "I do not mean to mother you. I am just worried. The thought of something happening to you or the baby terrifies me. I understand, but I need you to trust that I know my own body, my own limits. If I need to rest, I will rest. But I also need to feel useful, capable. Can you try to find a balance?" "I can try. Tell me if I am hovering too much." "I will. And Gideon, thank you for caring so much. Even when it drives me a little crazy, I know it comes from love." September arrived with heat that seemed even more oppressive with Clara so heavily pregnant. She was uncomfortable and tired, ready for the baby to come. Gideon had brought Dr. Mitchell out to the ranch twice to check on her, wanting to be sure everything was progressing normally. On September 15th, Clara's labor began. It started in the middle of the night, sharp pains that woke her from sleep. She touched Gideon's shoulder, her voice tight. "It is time." He was out of bed immediately, lighting lamps, helping her out of her nightgown and into a loose dress. By the time he rode to town to fetch Dr. Mitchell and Martha Henderson, who had agreed to assist with the birth, Clara's contractions were coming regularly. The labor was long and difficult. Clara had known it would be painful, but the reality exceeded her imagination. For hours she labored, walking when she could, resting when she must, Martha and Dr. Mitchell coaching her through each contraction. Gideon stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement. When she screamed with pain, he did not flinch or leave. When she cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place, he took it without complaint. He was her anchor, her steady point in the storm. Finally, as the sun began to set, the baby came. A boy, red-faced and squalling, perfect in every way. Dr. Mitchell placed him on Clara's chest, and she burst into tears, exhausted and overwhelmed and more in love than she thought possible. "He is beautiful," Gideon said, his own eyes wet. "You did it, Clara. You were so strong." They named him Gabriel Matthew Davis, Gabriel for Gideon's father and Matthew for Clara's. He had a shock of dark hair and gray eyes like his father, and from the moment he entered the world, he had his parents wrapped around his tiny fingers. The first weeks were exhausting. Gabriel was a fussy baby, colicky and demanding. Clara and Gideon took turns walking him through the night, bouncing and singing and trying desperately to soothe his cries. They were both running on little sleep, frayed and overwhelmed. One night, about 3 weeks after Gabriel's birth, Clara finally got him to sleep and returned to bed only to have him wake again 20 minutes later. She felt tears of frustration and exhaustion prick her eyes as she lifted him from his cradle. "I cannot do this," she whispered. "I am so tired and nothing I do is right. He hates me." Gideon took Gabriel from her arms. "He does not hate you. You are his mother and you are doing an amazing job. He is just a baby. They are all like this at first." "How do you know? You have never had a baby before either." "I do not know. I am guessing. But what I do know is that we are in this together. You are not alone, Clara. We are a team, remember." He walked Gabriel around the room, bouncing gently, and miraculously, the baby began to calm. Clara watched her husband, this man who had shown her what love really meant, and felt her heart swell. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. Now go to sleep. I have got him for a while." As the weeks turned into months, Gabriel became easier. The colic faded, and he began to sleep for longer stretches. Clara and Gideon adjusted to their new reality as parents, finding their rhythm. They were exhausted and often overwhelmed, but they were also happy in a deep, fundamental way. Gabriel was 6 months old when they celebrated their second Christmas in Florence. The cabin felt alive with his presence, his gurgles and cries, and eventually his laughter filling the spaces that had once been silent. They took him to church on Christmas Eve, and the whole town cooed over him, passing him from person to person while Clara watched nervously. "He is going to be spoiled rotten by this town," Gideon said with a laugh. "He deserves to be spoiled. He is perfect." The winter passed quietly. Gideon worked hard to keep the ranch going while also helping with Gabriel. Clara managed the household and took care of their son, but Gideon insisted on being an active father, changing diapers and giving baths and rocking Gabriel to sleep. He did not see it as women's work. He saw it as his responsibility and his privilege. Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle had calved successfully, increasing the herd. Gideon's hard work was paying off, and he talked about hiring help next year if things continued to go well. Clara's garden flourished, and she began preserving food for the following winter. Gabriel grew rapidly, hitting each milestone with determination. He rolled over, sat up, began to crawl. He was a happy baby now, all smiles and laughter, adored by his parents and the extended community of Florence. In the summer of 1884, when Gabriel was nearly a year old, Clara realized she was pregnant again. The news brought mixed emotions. She was thrilled at the thought of another baby, of giving Gabriel a sibling. But she also remembered how difficult her first pregnancy and birth had been, how exhausting the newborn stage was. When she told Gideon, he was overjoyed but also concerned. "Are you happy about this?" he asked. "I am. Just a little overwhelmed. It feels soon." We will manage. We did it once, we can do it again, and this time we know what to expect. The second pregnancy was easier in some ways and harder in others. Clara was less sick, but she was also chasing after an active toddler. Gabriel demanded constant attention, and there were days when Clara felt like she could barely keep her head above water. But Gideon was there always. He took over more of the household tasks, hired a young man from town to help with the ranch work, insisted Clara rest whenever possible. And the women of Florence rallied around her again, showing up with meals and offers to watch Gabriel for a few hours. This baby came faster than the first. Clara's labor started in the morning, and by evening she was holding a daughter, Emily Grace Davis, named for Gideon's mother and Clara's. She was smaller than Gabriel had been, more delicate with Clara's dark hair and eyes. "A daughter," Gideon said wonderingly, cradling the tiny girl in his large hands. "I have a daughter." "Are you disappointed it is not another boy? Are you joking? She is perfect. They both are. I am the luckiest man alive." Emily was an easier baby than Gabriel had been, content to sleep and eat and observe the world with solemn eyes. Gabriel was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to touch her and help with her care. Clara and Gideon had to watch him carefully to make sure his enthusiastic affection did not overwhelm the newborn. Life with two children was chaotic, but full of love. The cabin rang with the sounds of family, with Gabriel's excited chatter and Emily's cries and the constant hum of activity. Clara and Gideon had little time for themselves, but they stole moments when they could, late-night conversations after the children were asleep, early morning kisses before the day began. As the years passed, the ranch continued to grow. Gideon's hard work and Clara's careful management meant they were not only surviving but thriving. They added more cattle, more land when a neighbor sold out. They improved the cabin, adding a second bedroom for the children and a larger kitchen for Clara. Gabriel grew into a sturdy, energetic boy, all curiosity and mischief. He followed his father everywhere, learning to ride, learning to rope, learning the work of the ranch. Emily was quieter, more thoughtful, but no less determined. She helped Clara in the garden and with the household tasks, already showing signs of being a skilled manager. Clara blossomed in her role as mother and wife and rancher. The frightened woman who had arrived in Florence was gone, replaced by someone confident and capable. She still had moments when the past would surface, when a loud noise or sudden movement would make her flinch. But Gideon was always there to ground her, to remind her she was safe. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Gideon took Clara into town for a rare evening out. Tom and Sarah Benson watched the children, and Clara and Gideon attended a dance, just like they had that first time. "Remember when we danced here and we were both terrible?" Gideon said as he spun her around the floor. "We are still terrible," Clara laughed. "But I do not care. Neither do I. I just like having an excuse to hold you." They danced until late, then walked slowly back to the Bensons to collect their children. The night was cool and clear, stars brilliant overhead. "Are you happy?" Gideon asked, echoing the question Clara had asked him so many times. "I am happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me a life I did not know I could have, safety and love and a family, everything I ever wanted. You gave me those things too. Before you came, I was just existing. You made me live." They stopped walking, facing each other in the moonlight. Gideon cupped Clara's face in his hands. "That night when you burned the chicken and flinched when I stood up, I promised myself I would spend every day proving to you that not all men are cruel, that you deserved better. Have I done that? You have done so much more than that. You showed me what real love looks like, what partnership means. You helped me heal and grow and become someone I am proud to be. I love you more than I can ever express. I love you too. Always. They kissed under the stars, this couple who had started as strangers and become everything to each other. The years continued to pass. Gabriel grew into a responsible young man, taking over more of the ranch work as he got older. Emily became Clara's right hand, managing the household with the same capability her mother had shown. Clara and Gideon talked sometimes about having more children, but decided 2 was enough. They had their hands full and their hearts full, and that was plenty. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1895, the Davis Ranch was one of the most successful in the area. Gideon had a reputation as a fair and honest rancher, and Clara was known for her kindness and skill. They employed several hands now, and the property had expanded significantly. Gabriel turned 18 that year, and there was talk of him courting the doctor's daughter, a sweet girl named Anna who had moved to Florence with her father. Gideon teased his son mercilessly about it, but Clara saw the way Gabriel looked at Anna and recognized the beginning of love. "He is so young," she said to Gideon one night. "You were younger when you married Martin, and I do not think Gabriel is planning to propose tomorrow. Let them figure it out. I just want him to be happy, to find what we found. He will. We raised him to respect women, to value partnership. He will be fine." Emily, now 11, was showing interest in teaching. She loved books and learning and often talked about becoming a teacher like Miss Ross, who was planning to retire in a few years. "I think she would be wonderful at it," Clara said. "She is patient and kind and so smart." "She gets that from her mother," Gideon said, "and her stubbornness from her father." Fair enough. They were sitting on the porch, as they still did most evenings when the weather allowed. It had been their habit for years, this quiet time together at the end of the day. Gabriel and Emily were inside doing their chores, and the ranch was quiet around them. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life," Clara said, "that we built all this from nothing. Not from nothing. We built it from hope and hard work and love. Do you ever regret it? Advertising for a bride. Taking a chance on a stranger. Never. Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Davis. And you saved my life, Gideon, in every way that matters." As the sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, they sat together in comfortable silence, hands linked. They had built a good life here in the Arizona desert, had created a family and a home and a future. The frightened woman and the lonely cowboy had found each other and made something beautiful. Gabriel came out onto the porch. "Mama, Papa, dinner is ready." "Your mother and I cooked dinner," Clara said. "When did you start helping?" "Emily made me." "She said you two were getting old and needed help." Gideon laughed. "Old? I am not even 40 yet." "That is old, Papa." They went inside to the meal their children had prepared, to the warmth and laughter of family. This was what Clara had dreamed of in those dark days with Martin, what she had hoped for without really believing it could exist. A home full of love, children who felt safe and valued, a husband who treated her like an equal, a partner, a treasure. Later that night, after the children were in bed, Clara and Gideon lay together in the darkness. His arm was around her, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For sitting down that night. For saying it was just food. For giving me the space to learn to trust you. For every moment since then. For loving me. You do not have to thank me for loving you. That is the easiest thing I have ever done. Still, I want you to know, I see you, Gideon. I see how hard you have worked to make me feel safe. How patient you have been. How much you have given me. I see it all, and I am grateful every single day. Clara, my darling girl, you have given me just as much. You took a chance on me. You built this life with me. You gave me children and a home and a purpose. We saved each other." It was true, Clara thought. They had saved each other. The broken woman and the lonely man had found each other in the wilderness and built something that would last, had built a love that would endure. The ranch continued to thrive in the following years. Gabriel did eventually marry Anna Mitchell, and they built a small house on the edge of the Davis property, planning to take over the ranch when Gideon and Clara were ready to retire. Emily went to school in Tucson to become a teacher, returning to Florence to teach at the very school she had attended as a child. Clara and Gideon grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and good living. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it deepened with time, becoming something solid and unshakable. They became grandparents when Gabriel and Anna had their first child, a boy they named Gideon after his grandfather. Clara held her grandson and marveled at the circle of life, at how far she had come from that terrified young woman stepping off the stagecoach. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1907, the whole town of Florence threw them a party. It seemed everyone they had ever known showed up to celebrate the couple who had become pillars of the community. Tom and Sarah Benson, now elderly themselves, made a toast about young love and lasting commitment. Dr. Mitchell, retired now with grandchildren of his own, spoke about how Clara and Gideon had always been his favorite couple. Clara stood beside her husband, surrounded by children and grandchildren and friends, and felt overwhelming gratitude. This life, this beautiful, complicated, wonderful life, had started with burned chicken and a cowboy who sat down when he could have stood tall and intimidating. Had started with a man who said it's just food and meant it, who had shown her through actions rather than words that she was valuable, that she deserved kindness, that love did not have to hurt. As they danced together at their anniversary celebration, Gideon pulled her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am, how blessed, how much I love you." "I love you too, today, tomorrow, always." "Always," Clara echoed. And as they swayed together to the music, surrounded by the life they had built and the people they loved, Clara knew that she had found exactly what she had been searching for all those years ago. She had found home. She had found safety. She had found herself. But most importantly, she had found love. Real, honest, enduring love with a cowboy who had sat down on the floor and changed her life forever with 3 simple words: "It's just food." The stars came out over Florence that night, bright and steady in the desert sky, watching over a town and a family and a love story that had started with fear and patience and grown into something legendary. Clara and Gideon Davis had built their happily ever after, one day at a time, one kindness at a time, one moment of choosing love over fear. And it was more beautiful than either of them could have ever imagined.